22 years old Ayxan Askarov, leader of the Naftalan Youth Advocacy Group, is asking, how would you describe a good leader in just a few words?
Thank you. Yes, it's something I think about quite a lot. And I think traditionally when we talk about leaders, we think of somebody with a vision, somebody who's looking to the future, looking to see which way they should be guiding things. I think that's true, but it's not everything. I think a true leader is also somebody who empowers the people that they are leading. They listen to them, they find out what those people are aiming for and dreaming of, and to the best of their ability, and as much as it fits in with what they're doing, they encourage and help those people to fulfill their dreams alongside the big vision of the organisation.
Thank you. Another question is, do you think a leader should be different from other group members? If yes, in what ways?
Interesting. I think the answer is, as all good answers, yes and no. I think that the role of leader is different, and I think that's very important to recognise. The leader is also somebody who will take responsibility for decisions that are made. But the leader isn't different and superior because of who they are. They're different and take decisions because of the role they're playing. So it's very important to separate out what you're doing from who you are. Who you are is a group member. What you're doing is leading a group, and that role needs to be a different role from what others in the group are playing.
Thank you. Another leader, 17 years old, Nurana Namazlı, Gənc Youth Advocacy Group, is asking what should we do in order to succeed as young leaders?
I think as young leaders, you're in perhaps a difficult position here, especially when you're trying to advocate, because there isn't a tradition of listening to young people. So you have, to a certain extent, to fit into other people's expectations of you. You have to be polite. And you have to give respect to people who have higher positions. At the same time, you need to be persistent. You can be polite and come back again and again and again and again, and people will begin to listen to you because you're oh, that's the person who wants to talk about this. They get to know you because of the issues that you espouse. And then the third thing I think is that you always need to be positive. Don't go in there saying, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're no good. You go in there saying, there's a problem here. I want to help, we want to help you to solve this problem. This is what we can do, and this is what, if you do, we think would really help the problem. So be positive in the way you present things.
Aysun Imanova, 18 years old, leader of Shirvan Youth Advocacy Group, would like to know, what are your main features and habits as a leader that you developed in yourself?
I think the first habit you have to develop is listening. Because the temptation is to speak and have other people listen. But if you don't listen in return, then your speaking is going to be going off in all sorts of different directions away from what people are actually thinking and wanting to do. Another habit that I've had to develop is to deliberately go out and talk to people. Even though I feel shy or I might feel embarrassed, I have to say, it's not for me, this is for, in my case, this is for children. This is why I'm going out and talking to this person. This is why I'm asking this person for money. This is why I'm asking this person to do something. It's for children. So I don't need to be embarrassed because I'm not asking for something for me. I'm asking for something which is for the general good. So those are two habits that I've developed.
Our second question is, what is that motivates you most of all as a leader?
I think what I really enjoy is when you can bring people together around an issue. Whether it's the staff and the people you're working with, whether it's other partners, but when you can bring people together and you say, no, we're working for something that really matters, and we're working for the children of Azerbaijan, for example, and then it's a great satisfaction. You feel, yes, we're achieving something. We've created something, a partnership or a group of people working together that otherwise wouldn't, and so this makes a difference.
Third question comes from Aysun again. How do the most successful ideas come to you? Is there any secret?
Take long hot baths. Actually, seriously, what you need is time to think. And one of the main things that I've learned from management courses I've been on is that it's too easy to get caught up in being busy and not allocating time to think and reflect. And if you don't take a step back and say, why are we doing this? Is this really the best way to go about what we're doing? If you don't stop and think, you'll become less and less effective. So you have to be very ruthless with yourself and say, I'm going to spend 2 hours or 3 hours either on my own or with a small group of people talking about what we do. And the second thing is talk to people who are totally unrelated to what you do. Because again, you talk to the people that you know and you get into a little kind of box. But if you talk to somebody who does something totally different and you have to explain to them what you're doing, they might have ideas that you never would have thought of. So it's really refreshing to talk to people outside of what you're doing about what you're doing.
Thank you, very nice advice. Kamala Hasanova, a 16 years old leader of the Imişli Youth Advocacy Group, is asking, imagine that you grow up with a project in mind, you study and graduate from a university, and now you are ready to realize your idea. You actually start working on it, but then you suddenly receive another proposal promising you a big fortune and prestige. What would be your choice, and what would you recommend to those young people who might find themselves in a similar situation?
You'll be lucky if you have that kind of decision to make. I think my advice would be, it's clear which one is more attractive right now, but you have to think about what you will feel like in 10 or maybe 20 years' time. What is really going to be satisfying? And it is very, very unusual for people to find money and prestige satisfying. They always want more. As soon as you receive you're at one level of income, you start looking at the next one. As soon as you're there, you start looking at the next one. There was an interview with Mr. Rockefeller when he was getting towards the end of his life, and somebody said, so how much more money do you need? Maybe another million, he said. Never enough, it's never enough. So what will be satisfying? You have to be practical, you have to feed yourself and your family and things like that. But just bear in mind that money will not satisfy. And if you only pursue money, you will never be satisfied.
Great. Another big question comes from Kamala. Early marriage is one of the main problems of our society, particularly in specific areas at the moment. General awareness-raising campaigns are conducted by various stakeholders. My question, however, has to do with those cases when a person has already become a victim of early marriage. What kind of activities should be considered to make sure this person remains an equal part of the society?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm enjoying this one. I think you have to think about what barriers that person is facing because they became part of this early marriage. And most likely they're facing two things. One is social isolation, and the other is economic lack of economic opportunities. So I would think, this is kind of off the top of my head, that the best thing you could do would be to help set up little kind of self-help groups, young brides groups, I don't know what to call it, where they could first meet and talk and share experiences, and perhaps have somebody from outside giving them advice and helping them to be empowered. And secondly, to work on some kind of economic opportunity, whether it's microfinancing for keeping their own chickens or growing something or weaving or whatever it is, something that they can start generating their own income, which will improve their worth to their husband, if that's how we have to think of it. It'll improve their self-confidence and give them an opportunity and a good reason to get together with other people. So that would be what would occur to me.
Thank you. Hanım Allahyarova, 24 years old, a leader of the Saatli Youth Advocacy Group, would like to know, how would you start your speech before the audience that is non-familiar to you and older than you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately there are very few audiences older than me now. But if I think back, what would I do? This relates a little bit to the answers I made before, which is that you have to acknowledge who they think they are, even if you don't agree with them. So you have to start by thanking them, you have to start by saying you know that they have a lot more experience than you. You know that they have wide contacts and they've read much more than you have. And what you're doing is to come and give your point of view to help them to do what they want to do. And that way you're acknowledging their position and their genuine experience and responsibility, but you can offer something to help them to do their job better, which is the viewpoints of the people who are concerned in what's happening. So keep the respect going. Even if you don't feel it inside, keep the respect out in giving your speech.
Her next question is also very interesting. How do you normally manage a distracted audience?
Yes. That I have a lot of experience in. It depends on the audience, it depends on the situation. But if you can, just stop your speech and ask them, am I not addressing what you need to hear? Try talking to them directly. I have not seen it done much here. This is done a lot in British and I think a lot of European kind of political dialogue. People will be shouting things out or trying to disrupt and so on. And usually the way is to talk to them directly and say, what do you mean by that? Or address their question or get their attention in some way. Or if you're really desperate, you just stand there in silence like this. See, silence is very powerful. Everybody gets uncomfortable. Oh, what's happening, what's happening? But sometimes people will just not listen, and you can't force people to listen. You can only hope that half the people are listening, or 1/3 of the people are listening, or even one person is listening, and move on.
Thank you. 22nd years of Elvin Hasanov, leader of Laçın Youth Advocacy Group, is asking, how can I develop from a manager to a leader?
Yes, I think you'll probably find that if we paint this with broad brushstrokes, the manager is the person who's keeping things running. The manager is the person who keeps on top of things, who has the management indicators, who makes sure everything is running properly. To go from there to leadership is the biggest difference is vision that I was talking about before. You have to direct the organization, not just keep it rolling along. You're not just the engine keeping things moving, you are the person behind the wheel who directs where this car will go. So you have to be the one thinking and visioning and then deciding and taking responsibility for your decisions. That's what makes a leader different from a manager.
Thank you. The next question came from Kazım Mehmedov, leader of Ucar Youth Advocacy Group, 25 years old, and it is, what's more important for a leader, a smiling, welcoming approach or well-developed oratorial skills?
Now, I suspect that for a youth leader, the welcoming approach is more important, because if you don't have it, then however good your oratory, nobody's going to listen to you. They just say this is some jumped up kid who manages to speak well, very cute, very clever, but they won't be listening because they haven't connected with you. If you don't connect with your audience, they're not going to listen to you. So you have to have that connection first. And then if you have oratory on top of that, great. If you have to have one or the other, get the rapport, get the connection first.
Thank you. 19 years old Raul Abbasada, leader of the Gögöl Youth Advocacy Group, is asking, what are the common and different characteristics of the Azerbaijani and, let's say, American youth?
Well, what's in common is also always much more than what's different. What's in common is that youth is the time when you're transitioning from being told what to do to deciding what to do, from taking in information to using it and eventually imparting it, from doing things because other people tell you should do it, to making your own decisions about life. Those are all things that are going on around the world. What I think I would say is different here than in, let's say, Europe or North America, is that in Europe and North America there's an expectation that young people will challenge authorities, will ask difficult questions, will speak out on issues. I'm not saying people in Europe and North America like it, But there is an expectation that will happen. And that's much less so here. So if I were looking for the biggest difference, that's probably the one that I would like. But that's similar to, in Azerbaijan, it's similar to Taiwan, where my wife grew up. She was telling me that when she went to school, if the teacher made a mistake, nobody would ever say anything. And maybe at the end of class, you would go to the teacher and say, did you make a mistake? And then you would have to go and tell all your pupils. Whereas in Europe or the US, if the teacher makes a mistake, you say, I'm sorry, I think that's wrong, and you try and do it respectfully, but you challenge it, and then everybody knows, everybody's clear, everybody can move on. So there are different ways, expectations of how young people act, and I think that's probably the biggest difference between Europe and North America and here.
Thank you. And finally, the last couple of questions came from 20 years old Shabnam Mammadova, leader of the Aqdash Youth Advocacy Group. She would like to know, when you were very young, could you imagine that you would become the head of UNICEF family? Now, when you are, how does it feel?
No, I never thought I would be a leader in UNICEF. I wanted to work for UNICEF probably since I was in my teens, and I heard about UNICEF and what it does. And then I studied all sorts of things. I got distracted in all sorts of other areas. I thought I was going to be an academic. I thought I'd become a professor. And then I suddenly got a chance to work for UNICEF, and I thought, yes, that's right. That's what I wanted to do. So I joined UNICEF in a technical position, and things just kind of grew and grew and grew to the job I have here, which absolutely is, the best job in the world. It's you're working for children, you're working with great people, everybody's motivated in the same direction. What could be better? So you should be working for UNICEF in the end too.
Thank you. Last question from her. Becoming a leader requires overcoming many challenges. What would you recommend us in this regard?
My challenges, which I talked a bit about before, is that I'm not naturally somebody who goes up to strangers and talks to them and particularly asks them for things. I can tend to be impatient and want things to happen right now, which doesn't always happen. And there are other things. My challenges won't be your challenges. Everybody has things that they do well and things that they don't do well. The biggest advice I was ever given was, don't spend all of your time trying to fix the things you don't do well. If you're not good at one thing, try and find somebody to work with you who is good at that thing, and concentrate on doing what you already do well, concentrate on making that really good. Because you cannot shine by concentrating on things that are not good. You can only shine by working on things that you're already good at and making them better and better. There's a saying in England that you cannot teach a pig to sing. It really annoys the pig and it frustrates you. Don't try and get people to do things they can't do. Find what they can do and help them to do it. That applies to yourself as well. If you're a great speaker, work on being an even better speaker. If you're a great organizer, work on being a better organizer. If you're a great support person, be the best support person there can be. There are many things that you can do, but there are only a few that you can really shine at. Find them, shine them up, be a star.